Welcome back to the Village Bonfire for another episode of the Wild Sacred Journey podcast. A podcast not just for your mind, but for your body and spirit too. Here we don't just talk theory. Instead, we compassionately engage with our lived experiences and a wide variety of topics together, all to invite the question, in these times we find ourselves in, how do we be more human? Thank you for being here. May these conversations awaken, inspire, repair, and evolve something deep within each of us and serve the wild, tender aliveness of our personal and collective hearts. So welcome back to another episode of the Wild Sacred Journey podcast. Oops, as I knocked my mug. So as always, we'll start by lighting our candle, our village fire. And just gathering together virtually, but also in some deep, mysterious way around the flame, around the warmth, then community. And just the sense of, just the sense of arriving. And wherever you are, wherever you're listening from, even if you're alone, you're not alone because there's this web. And so just take a couple deep breaths in and out and just let yourself, in whatever way feels accessible to you in this moment, just kind of let yourself feel the spaciousness around you, within you, and how that's that same spaciousness that it unites all of us. And from that place, we can begin to hear, and we can begin to hear things that might move us, surprise us, make us ask more questions. And so in that space of wondering, I welcome you to today's conversation. And today is a conversation. I have with me today Duncan Passmore. And I was actually introduced to Duncan's story and GoFundMe campaign through Tad Hargrave, who was on the podcast episode a few episodes back now. But he and I had a conversation around ethical marketing and culture and stories and all kinds of stuff that the two of us love to nerd out about. And then within a day or two after we'd recorded it, actually, Tad shared with me Duncan's GoFundMe. And I was just really deeply, deeply moved by Duncan's story of his son Torin's life and Torin's time on the earth, and how it, how their time with him was just a testament, I think, to being human and being alive, and community and culture making and all of these other things. And so, so I reached out and I was like, oh, would you be willing? I'm sure you have a lot going on, but would you be willing to be on the podcast? And Duncan said yes. So, really, really thrilled to have you here, Duncan. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And so we're keeping Duncan's bio short and sweet today: a husband, a father, a writer, and a woodworker of 20 years. So, so that is sort of a more socially interwoven bio than sometimes people's professional bios are, but I still want to give you an opportunity to sort of, weave yourself into the social fabric of things for people, or introduce yourself or your story in whatever way you would like to today.
I mean, it's short because I just don't have any qualifications. I'm not qualified for anything.
That's probably not true. But see, I think that is that ancestral way, right? Is the qualifications are actually the experience. and
yeah,
how we are connected with people, less than educational bios and all of that.
Every time
anyway.
I've tried to get a qualification outside of, kind of high school situation, it's just the barriers have come down. It's just kind of no, move on. So that's why it's short, and I don't have any letters after my name or anything like that. But where to start? I suppose we could start with the writer and the woodworker aspect. Woodworking came first, I suppose, and I fell into that after leaving university, having that realization that it wasn't for me. I was studying biomedical science, trying to get into medicine, but I didn't get the kind of high school results that I should have got. I just woke up one day and realized that I was only there because my parents and my teachers told me I should be, and it wasn't good enough for me. So I funded my social life working in offices for a couple of years, and then landed a job working on an eco house kind of community project, where I discovered woodwork, and for the first time, and just fell in love with it straight away. And that was it, really. And then over the years, it's just become like with any craft or any profession or anything that we do for long periods of time, and kind of try to become masterful at it. You just try to refine your approach and refine what it is you do. And I'm still very much in love with that aspect of it, day to day. I was in the workshop today making an incredible dining table for a client, and I still get lots of kicks out of it. It's great. I'm very lucky, very fortunate to have a job that I love doing in that regard. And the writing has only come about in more and more recent times, and it's another thing that I would love to be able to craft at. And there's lots of parallels and metaphors that I can take from woodwork and apply to wordsmithery. So that's with the writing. It's something that comes from somewhere else, and I'm intrigued to know where it comes from. I don't know if you've experienced when you're writing something, sometimes it just comes, and it's on the page, and there's kind of mysteriousness about that. So that's those two things. And then the father and husband. So I'm married to my wife, Sean. We've been married for almost 15 years. Hold on a minute, let me get this right. Coming up for 15 years. I am a father to my daughter Lowry, who is 9, and my son Torin, who would have been 13 this February just gone.
Well, when in February?
Sorry?
When in February?
February 27th.
Okay, February 24th.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. It's also my little sister's birthday as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's funny because I feel like so many things you've said, I'm like, oh, and then look at that. Oh, look at that shiny object. Oh, look at that shiny object. Oh, look at that thread. There's something that was really jumping out to me, I think, just in what you were talking about, sort of like that desire to be devoted to some sort of craft or some sort of mastery, like almost that desire to be worked by it, because it feels like as we refine our skills at something, we're letting ourselves be refined by it in a way. And I'm noticing that same impulse. And it's funny because I've recently started revisiting, I learned to weave back in October, I guess. And so I've been kind of playing around with that. And then I've kind of picked knitting back up, which I'd learned in college and haven't really done much since then. And, in university and haven't done much since then. And it's like, I'm finding myself, same with writing. Like I'm finding myself wanting to be worked by these things in a way that I think when I was younger, I just couldn't. I don't know. I think that's, yeah. I'm finding myself curious how much of that, yeah, is kind of something that happens with age. It's like we reach a point where I don't know. Yeah, we have the skills or the capacity or just you sense somehow that it's time for like to really let life teach us things.
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. To respond to that, I think I've often had the thought about, is it just the age? And that's actually quite a confounding thing. I look at the world. Just turned 46, and and I look at the world now, and I can feel the old man kind of coming out of me. Things just ain't like they used to be. I remember when all that was nothing but fields, and
Mhm.
all those kind of things. So I think that aspect is always in there. Is it because I'm getting older, or is there some other aspect at play? And it's probably that and that as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and that aspect of earlier on, you said when we were talking before you
Mhm.
hit go, about what it means to be human,
Mhm.
um, and I think there's just quite possibly there's a point of kind of maturation that
Mhm.
happens whereby um, I don't know, the urgency seems to just kind of like the urgency of getting shit done, being seen for getting shit done, being
Mhm.
recognized, making a name for yourself, all those kind of 20s and 30s
Mhm.
ambitions
Mhm.
tend to kind of just drop a little bit. And
Mhm.
therefore the ego isn't necessarily as much in the driving seat as it
Mhm.
might have been. And I
Mhm.
think that's really helpful for art and for craft, because
Mhm.
then you're out the way, and
Mhm.
and and then the actual thing itself can move in,
Mhm.
and that's where I think you begin to get worked by rather than being the worker.
Mhm.
If you can take yourself off out of the center and just stand to one side a little bit and let the main act come in,
Mhm. Mhm.
something like that anyway.
Mhm. Yeah. Also wondered too how much of it is in response to some of the societal forces and just the that it feels like in general the overculture is kind of on one trajectory.
Mm,
And whether there are some or many or perhaps eventually all of us, I don't know, like humans who are kind of going, wait a minute, and it almost feels like, yeah, there's this part of me that feels like it's suddenly seeking out the opposite direction.
yeah,
We're like, what are the things? Okay, society's telling us everything should be done quickly. So what if I do something slowly? Like, what does that
yeah.
do for my body? Because the quickly doesn't feel good, and or
Mm.
like that kind of, yeah, interesting. Well, would you like to, share any of Torin's, more of that story and your journey with Torin?
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start. I mean,
Yeah,
if you could orient me somewhere
yeah,
along the trajectory, then I can go. But because
yeah. It's
it was
quite a
12 years
yeah,
of life with him. So yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Anything? Yeah, if you can kind of point me in the direction, and I'll have a
Absolutely.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess basically for anybody listening, I mean, if you want to kind of give, you know, a little bit of like the synopsis that's kind of on the GoFundMe, sort of
Hmm.
that just the overview, kind of an orienting intro overview to kind of,
Sure.
so I think you said it was when he was 10 months old. Is that right? That he got
Yeah. So um, we
diagnosed?
yeah, Torin's diagnosis was in October 2011, about 5 months after he needed to all of a sudden, out of the blue, seemingly, needed to have blood transfusions and regular ones. So that was back then, and the diagnosis of his illness was something called Pearson syndrome, which is a very, at the time there were like 100 cases in the world
Wow.
of this very rare form of progressive mitochondrial disease. And just in case you don't know what mitochondria are, they are a what's known as an organelle, that exists in almost every cell in our body, apart from red blood cells, I think. And they are the kind of the gateway of life, really. It's where life begins, or where life happens. It's where energy from food and oxygen from the air that we breathe come together to create the energy that our bodies and cells need to thrive. And mitochondrial disease is when that process is, inhibited. And there are many complex reasons how that can become inhibited. But that's the kind of brief synopsis of what mitochondrial disease is. So we knew from the word go that, he wouldn't be around for as long as we were hoping. Certainly, that he wouldn't be around, that we would live longer than he was going to,
Right.
And in those days, the urgency was kind of, well, is it today? Is it next week? Is it in a month's time? We just don't know. As time went by, we were able to kind of understand the nature of the illness and how it was kind of manifesting itself within his body. Although it was always kind of tough and challenging, there was a rhythm. We established a rhythm in his life, and there would be very, very long hospital admissions. The longest one in the end was 5 months. We ended up being in hospital with him. And the kind of the most major symptom of his expression of Pearson syndrome was that his gut slowly began to fail, and he stopped eating at about the age of sort of 4-5 years old.
Wow.
And so we had to do something about that, because he was, very, very underweight. So he needed to have what's called a gastrostomy, which is a small kind of button. They call it a button, which is kind of a hole basically made into his tummy, with a kind of, it's a bit like a plumbing kind of fitting on the outside, and you can connect up a tube to it, and he can be fed via this kind of formula concoction that the hospital gave us. And the interesting thing was that all those concoctions are, full of sugar, and they are full of all the minerals and all the stuff you need, but they're not very nice, And so we tried doing smoothies and kind of, green shakes and stuff, and he couldn't tolerate them. Actually, we tried doing all of that stuff, and it was really, his gut was just really delicate. And that process carried on for, I'd say, another 4 years, until then his gut stopped working again to an even more greater degree, by which time we ended up in the hospital for that 5 months. And excuse me, let's grab some water. And that time, after at the end of that admission, we came out, the only option really that we had was for him to have what's called a central line, which was something that came into his chest and kind of up into the neck, and then down through a vein till close to his heart. And we would feed him intravenously, kind of every night, using these kind of bespoke bags of nutrition that were made up specifically for him, according to his kind of blood results, and that we lived like that for about 4 years. It became a routine that we obviously never quite got used to. But what the line meant was that he wouldn't we didn't have to be in hospital very much at all. Whereas before he had that line, a lot of the time he would be suffering from dehydration, so we'd have to go into hospital very often for him to then get cannulated and then to have hooked up to fluids, and that was a kind of a repeating vicious circle. He was always
Mm.
becoming dehydrated.
Mm.
But the line enabled us to basically manage that at home,
Mm.
which was an incredible thing. Problem was that central line is potentially a very dangerous thing as well, because you have to be
Any kind of
really, really
infection.
careful about
Yeah.
infection. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Which we were at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then the time came where, I mean, and there are other aspects of his illness that were progressing still. You know, his sight was deteriorating, his hearing was deteriorating, and his mobility was also getting pretty tiresome for him. You know, it was all the other kids his age were just kind of, you know, growing into their fullness,
Mm.
and his body was moving in the opposite direction. You know, so that was a real tough thing for him and for us to witness. You know, as his parents.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, the line that he'd had was about 4 years old, and it needed to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctors, it was actually broken. It was kind of close to falling apart. So they said it needs to be changed. We booked him a session in the hospital. This is the date. Come and have it done. So we did. And he had a new line put in, and 4 days later he spiked at temperature. And he contracted sepsis while in the hospital. And so we fought really hard for about 5 weeks to try and get on top of things, and we actually thought we had. And the night before he was supposed to come home, he died very, very dramatically and very suddenly in the hospital with me. And yeah, you know, it's one of those things where even when you know, as in we've been told that he wasn't going to live very long, one of the things I've written is that, you know, we just never knew how or when, you know, and that's the thing, you can never be prepared for, you know. So the GoFundMe project is kind of, well, it's many things, and like we've already said, you know, it's many things now, and it'll be many different things later. And there's a lot to kind of fill in between the point at which Torin died and the GoFundMe project. But yeah, I suppose because of his inability to move around too much, there was something about Torin's nature, about his soul, that that knew all of this stuff, that kind of knew that his body wasn't working properly, that knew that he probably wasn't going to be around as long as he might hope and we might hope, that kind of that inherently had that kind of level of wisdom, to the extent that his imagination was incredibly vast. And he was an avid book reader, you know. He loved language. He was a storyteller, you know. Actually, he really was. He had that about him, you know, the storyteller about him. And so he was just in love with books and story and mythology and the underworld and the afterlife. You know, he just gravitated naturally towards all of that stuff. And one day, one of the members of staff at the children's hospital where he goes and had spent a lot of time, contacted me, and they were very close. It was a child play therapist at the hospital who he was very close to. And she said, "Look, I want to do one of these Make-A-Wish Foundation kind of applications for you." And me and my wife had always kind of held those things off at arm's length, you know, thinking, you know, it's an all expenses paid holiday to Disneyland, Florida for a week or something, you know. Like,
Mhm.
no thanks. But she said, look, you can go anywhere you like. I'll try and make it happen, but if you can just ask Torin where he wants to go, and then get back to me, and I'll fill out the application for you. And I said, okay, we'll do it. So I said to him, I asked him, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? And there's me hoping for, I don't know, you
Yeah.
name it. And he said, I want to go to the Lake District, which is, I don't know if you've been there, but it's the north of England, so it's highly likely to be cold and wet,
Yeah.
even in summer.
Yeah.
But it's the setting. This particular lake, Lake Windermere, is the setting of the story called The Swallows and Amazons, and that was one of the stories he loved. So he said, I want to go sailing on Lake Windermere, and we started to make plans, but we didn't get to do it with him. And so what we could do is just go up there tomorrow and hire a boat from the companies that
Mhm.
that hire boats out by the lake, and do the thing, and then come back and say, wasn't that nice? But there seemed to be something far more kind of ceremonial,
Mhm.
maybe, in
Mhm.
if we were to make the boat, basically.
Mhm.
So if we were to build the boat first, and then once we built it, take it to the lake and sail it for him. And somehow that all of a sudden made a lot of sense to
Yeah.
do that. I knew I had to make something for him. I knew that there was, that the ceremony of his death was not over, even after his funeral. And I was at a bit of a loss as to know what to do. And it's funny that it took my friend Martin Shaw, the storyteller and author and mythologist,
Mhm.
to come out of the hazel thicket last summer when I was in the woods with him, and he said, "A boat? You've got to build Torin a boat." And I was like, yeah, that's it. Of course. Why didn't I think of that myself?
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and yeah, so that it all fell into place. And the boat theme, it's been very very prolific throughout the time since Torin died.
Mm.
So on his funeral day, 6 of my woodworking friends made like a boat for him to be buried in, and we took him down to the river down here in Totnes, the River Dart, and there were 4 big 10-man canoes waiting for us on the river, where we put him into the boat, and then 35 of us paddled him down. Family and friends were all kind of waiting around on the quay for us to send us off, and we paddled him down, kind of one last final journey downstream, and then we moored up and carried him across the fields and up to the burial ground,
Mm.
which is this incredible place,
Mm.
overlooking the Dart Valley and overlooking the River Dart below. And 10 years ago, or 11 years ago now, I built the building up. There's a ceremonial building up there, which Stephen, actually, when he was here once, we did a kind of an ancestral kind of blessing of the building, which was quite a thing.
Mm.
And I remember being up there and looking down at the river, thinking, that's the way to get here. Why come by car or road when you could actually come
Mm.
by the river, that
Mhm.
route? It just seemed all of a sudden, it was just, that was the thing. And I came
Mm.
home to Sean that day and said, I had this thought, what do you think? And that's quite a thing to do, to kind of, out of the blue, have a conversation with your wife about the day that your child dies. This is what we think we should do. It's a big deal.
Mm. Mhm.
And I think without kind of wanting to sound arrogant, you know, it's kind of testament to our relationship and kind of where we were at the time to be able to have that conversation and then go, yeah, I think that would work. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a maddening thing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of have a conversation about, but we weren't in the business of shutting things away, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
pretending certain things weren't happening or certain things weren't going to come to pass. So I'm grateful for that we can have those conversations and just talk about, you know, not maniacally, because you know there is a seduction in going down that road too far. So you know, but we could have the conversations that were necessary at the time. Anyway, where am I going with this? Yeah, it's the boat theme. Yeah, so boats have just
Mm-hmm.
appeared um, since Torin died. You know,
Mm-hmm.
very much. If just before his funeral, as our friends were making this boat for him, the whole river journey with him,
Mm-hmm.
and now this other boat that has kind of made itself known to us and is yet to be. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
we have the plans. You know, so it's kind of it's in the making, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the crowdfunder is to raise money
Mm-hmm.
to get this thing done. And we've just hit the 50%
Mm-hmm.
kind of waymark in the last few days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And the crowdfunder, I'll have the, link in the show notes and everything if anybody listening feels called to contribute. And I know you said it's going until June 9th. I think you said you're going to be running it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. Well, I love, and what you're sharing, it feels like it kind of weaves back in some ways with this idea of craft. And I mean, obviously, but like ceremony too, and how ceremony is also this thing that kind of comes through us to work us in a way, and I've been finding myself increasingly, I sort of said this to you before, but yeah, increasingly interested in this idea that being alive isn't actually inevitable. And that, like, what if actually this moment between when we're born and when we die is actually one long ceremony? It's really one long threshold, one long kind of proving ground, refining ground, in some ways, crafting ground for our souls. And if there's something about that idea that it's like, if we live from that place, I just feel like it would shift so much of how we operate in the world and how we're in relationship with ourselves and each other and the world around us. And yeah, so I guess kind of a couple pieces I'm picking up. I'd love to hear if there's something too that feels sort of poetically, symbolically powerful in a way too, with it being a mitochondrial disease, and like you said, mitochondria really being like where life happens in the
Mm-hmm.
cells. And so that kind of grappling with and engaging with that question of life and science and death and all of that kind of like coming together in Torin's journey. Yeah, I guess what if anything are you willing to share about kind of what that was like for you, or particularly how did any of this kind of shift for you, your ideas of what it meant to be alive? Or do you feel like it just kind of was an opportunity to put values you already had in practice? Or does that question make sense at all?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
It was an opportunity to get real, you know. It was an opportunity to actually it was a kind of a proving ground for all the
Mhm.
ideas, you know, that you think
Mhm.
you have about how what the best way to live is, or the best way to be, or the best, you know, there's that. Sorry, I'm sniggering at the kind of the new age kind of slogan that says, you know, you just be the best you can be.
Mhm.
um and uh yeah, it just, what Torin's diagnosis did for us was that, other than, you know, it being in and of itself a devastating kind of
Sure.
piece of news,
Yeah.
um in the devastation, it really, really focused and honed down our ideas and our kind of concepts of what's important.
Mhm.
Or even not concepts or ideas, but the reality of the situation was,
Mhm.
okay, if this is what's going to happen and what we're heading towards, then we need to do this, this, and this.
Mhm. Mhm.
There was no real kind of quibbling about it. So it was very easy in a way to see, you know,
Mhm.
to sort the wheat from the chaff, to be able to go,
Mhm.
okay, well, get rid of all that stuff because it's not really that important, and it's not really
Mhm.
going to, you know, have much of an impact on us if we don't have that in our lives anymore. And now we can live this way and be around and kind of make the most of the time we have, you know. But whilst at the same time, um, it doesn't. It's not. It's not like a process of enlightenment, you know, when you have that news, or either when someone you love dies, you know. That depends on whatever enlightenment means. But I suppose let's say clarity instead, you know, that kind of sense of clear understanding. Um, there's also all sorts of of conditioning and history and baggage, emotional baggage, you know, that you're still carrying. Just because you've been given this news doesn't automatically um,
Mhm.
cleanse you of all of that
Mhm.
stuff. You know, it doesn't at all. So, you know, whilst there's this very, very kind of sharp, discerning thing that's been thrust into our lives, which is his diagnosis and the prognosis that says he's not going to be around for as long as you would like. There's also this um, kind of work that's then required of you in order to, you know, in order to meet the obligation and desire to kind of be the best person, um, or not be the best person. How do I put it? To kind of rise to the occasion,
Mhm.
in terms of, if he's not going to be around for very long, then what I could do is turn this into something about me, and I could
Mhm.
become a victim in this situation, and I
Mhm.
could be the one who's in pain, and I could be the one who's been hurt by this, and I can be the
Mhm.
one who life did something to me.
Mhm.
Or I could say to myself, well, the cost of this situation is going to be as high as I'm being told it's going to be, then you have to wrestle something out of it,
Mhm.
something of value. You know, you have to
Mhm.
wrestle
Mhm.
goodness, you have to wrestle love, you have to wrestle, um, you know, life from the situation, not just mere survival. You know,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of situation I found myself in. Was, okay, mate, you know, you've got a hell of a lot of work to do now, you know, to kind of try and undress all of the armor, I suppose, that I
Yeah.
put on myself over the years, you know. You know, and it's an incredibly painful process to peel that armor off when you think the armor is your skin, you
Mm.
know.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know if that
Yeah.
covers. I think I went off on one there, but you know, it's
No,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, because I think about that a lot, how, it's so easy when we get a diagnosis, I think similarly to kind of really anything, is like like feeling things is hard and like scary for most humans.
Hmm.
We kind of have this like instinct to want to sort of feel less in some ways. Like I see that a lot with clients a lot. Like they come because they're like, well, I'm feeling things and I don't want to feel anymore. And I'm like, well, I've got some news for you. It's going to get a little worse before it gets better,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but and so I think so often when people like I see a lot, like particularly I think it comes up a lot in sort of the communal rhetoric around like cancer, right? And sort of this
Hmm.
like, received a cancer diagnosis, fuck cancer, fight, and there's all of this warrior, um, and like you were saying, armored, sort of battle ready, hardened, kind of the languaging around it carries a lot of that energy. And obviously, like as we speak things that have that energy, our body responds,
Yeah.
and hardens up and armors up. And, you know, and I'm not here to say there's a right or a wrong way. I think each person has to grapple with whatever they're going through and, in their way. But then I look around at the world too, and like what's happening on the larger scale, and I just see how much war and empire and battle seems to be everybody's like default response to being uncomfortable, basically.
Yeah.
you know
Mm.
I mean, certainly I'm seeing that play out, on the national scale here in the US right now.
Hmm.
um and and so, yeah, and it seems like, I mean, like you said, there's a cost to whatever the prognosis is, the diagnosis, the prognosis, that there's a cost to life. But then, yeah, there's also a cost to like fighting what is.
Yeah.
And yeah, and people have so much baggage around the idea of surrender too, it feels
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um so yeah, I mean, yeah, that grappling with it, I was sharing with you kind of before we recorded, and people who've been listening have maybe heard me mention this before, but yeah, about 8 years ago or so, I received a diagnosis of a, genetic degenerative eye disease. And yeah, just grappling with kind of that tension of like, the nocebo, like to a certain extent, how do we create, like how much can we feed something by investing too much time and energy in the idea of an outcome, a specific outcome, but also not like bypassing, like spiritually bypassing,
Mm.
like the ground that we're actually standing on,
Yeah.
and yeah, just that grappling of like, how to navigate. I think I remember you saying in one of the GoFundMe writings you did about, I really like the phrase, what was it? Like grief and uncertainty in intimate ways, and like finding a way to say yes to life without saying no to death, I guess, or to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's, yeah. Um, yeah, I guess, is there anything more you kind of have to say about that? Or I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's plenty I could say about that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Um, one image that comes to mind when you were just talking about, this, you did mention the kind of language use around, especially cancer. The kind of the war speak, the battle
Mhm.
language around it. And one of the things that both Sean and I agreed on, one of the many things we agreed on, thankfully, I can thankfully say, is that we didn't get that way of talking about the illness. whilst at the same time, as you quite rightly said, you know, you can't judge anyone about how they decide to live out the expression of their disease, their expression of their own life. You know, you can't judge anyone for that. So we made sure that we didn't judge other parents with kids who had the same diagnosis for any of the choices they made. You know, we just, and I'm very grateful for meeting a lot of those parents as well, because in a way, what it did is for us is it kind of honed down how we didn't, by seeing how we didn't want to do things, helped guide us along the way. You know, so it's like, well, we don't want to do it like, we don't want to make the choices those guys have made. You know, so, and that's not me saying they shouldn't be doing what they're doing.
Right.
It's just
not right for you.
helpful. Yeah. Yeah. Very helpful.
Yeah.
So having said that, the battle language and the war speak for us felt like very much it was coming from a place of non-acceptance. You know, so it was coming from a place of, I have my plans, you know, and how fucking dare you, you know, insinuate that you're gonna sully those plans. You know, I'm just gonna carry on regardless, and I don't give a fuck what you say. Excuse my language. You know, I'm just gonna do it. And we just weren't willing to do that, and the reason is because Torin was born with his illness, and it's very much a part of who he is. It's his story. And so to deny that story for the sake of the plans we'd made for ourselves, which actually that doesn't exist. There's nothing, like, you can't grasp it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. It's just this idea. We just said, no, we're not going to do that, because it's who he is. It's not all of who he is, but it's very much a part of who he is. It's very much a part of our lives and our story, and it will be until the day that he's no longer here, and beyond. Which is why me and you are talking right now, to a certain degree. You know? Yeah. So we just weren't willing to deny that, and that comes back again to the cost. You know, what is the cost? How much of him do we want to kind of cut out? What does that do to some, you know, when you're talking about your own diagnosis, it may well be different. I don't know. If I got a diagnosis tomorrow, you know, a terminal diagnosis tomorrow, I'm pretty sure I'd do things pretty much the same way. But yeah, it was just an opportunity for honesty and kind of openness, and there's a freedom in that, you know. The other thing I wanted to share with you was the basis of most of that kind of war language and battle speak, which is fear. I remember one night coming to bed, and Sean was already fast asleep, and I got into bed, and this was before Torin died. We used to have carers for him, so for many years, me and Sean would take turns, sort of, I think every 2 nights. We did 2 nights on, 2 nights off with Torin, because both with his button, and then afterwards he had his line fitted. We always had to be with him, because he would get either tangled up in the line or the machine alarm and stuff like that. So someone always had to be with him, and he would be sick a lot. It was one of his kind of things he did a lot. He was sick a lot of the time. So we didn't really share a bed for like 4 or 5 years, and eventually we thought, this is crazy, you know, we need to get some help. So one of the amazing blessings about our National Health Service and kind of local councils and stuff is that we applied for care, and we got, you know, this funding that meant that 4 nights of the week we could have people of our choosing coming in, generally kind of young women who Torin really kind of, you know, developed a really strong bond with, and they would come in and stay the night with him and care for him and look after him. They've all become very close to us, you know, close to the family over the years. So one night we were there, and Torin was downstairs, and I could hear some stirring going on. I think he'd already been sick. I was lying there listening to it, and I just got gripped by this fear, this overwhelming fear. And I was lying in the bed, and this image that came to me, kind of above me, really, in the dark room, was this huge moonlit tsunami. It had just kind of got to this kind of point just where it's about to break, and it was frozen. And it was dark, and it was lit by the moon, and glistening. And I thought, that's kind of what you're doing. You're expending all your energy in kind of building up this kind of scaffold, trying to shore up the, you know, the kind of the dry land of your life, you know, and expending so much energy in trying to do that, that you can't actually engage in your life, because if you let go, it's all going to come crumbling down. So here you are doing that while everything else is happening on behind you, and you're missing, your life just goes by that way.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, that's no way to live.
Yeah.
So how about you just let the wave come? And I did, you know, lying there in the bed, and this wave came and it tumbled, and I was up. I didn't know what was up and what was down or left or right. And then eventually it's gone, and there's peace, you know. And although conceptually I knew that, you know, you could take me through that and go, oh yeah, well, of course, you know, of course that's how it works. But having that kind of visionary experience was incredible, because it was just a confirmation. Oh yeah, now you can really let go. There's nothing to hold on to now, you know. And you can live. You can live. You can live the time you have with him, not without fear, because, you know, fear of death is kind of pretty complex, fundamental thing, right?
Baked into being human, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just a very, very freeing experience, you know, to do. And I'm very grateful for that kind of vision, because I could be much more present, you know, after that, to what is, you know. And I think you used the term "what is," you know, and that's the trick, that's the deal, you know. That's what every great spiritual teacher has taught, you know, that's the secret of life. I don't know, but the secret of being human, I don't know, but it's certainly up there in terms of how to live in the now, you know, how to be attentive to what is, not what you would like, or not what not anything else, you know. So again, I can't remember the question you asked, but yeah, that's...
No, that was beautiful. I don't either. It's all good. Yeah, I think it was something along the lines of just grappling with that uncertainty and getting intimate with the uncertainty. Yeah. And so that's where too, I feel like the practice of craft, which is also, I think, in some ways the practice of ceremony, like kind of the showing up and then letting something work us, like that almost seems like those are also proving grounds then for, as well as maybe sustaining or like sustenance practices in hard times, you know, but that also they're the training ground for hard times in some ways is, I don't know, that's something I'm finding myself curious about, I guess, you know, that you know, because like you were sort of saying, so you guys could have gone to the lake and you could have rented a boat and you could have done it, and that would have been the convenient thing. My goodness, what is doing? And it would have done, you know, and that would have been the convenient thing. And then, you know, and again, not, not judging anyone's choices, and their choice of what feels right for them, but there's something about moving grief through the body, about working with the hands, about spending the time, because ceremony actually takes time, like showing up like that, not that it wouldn't be impactful, but I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect it wouldn't be as impactful as like actually building the boat, and
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
going through the process and taking the time and letting that period of the craft, which is also the ceremony, then
yeah,
actually like work you. And um yeah, and so there's something about that, it feels like it feeds, but that it also just kind of helps keep building those skills for when things are hard, for knowing how to, yeah, let go of the plan in favor of like the actual thing you can touch that's here,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Stephen Jenkinson has said to me before about ceremony, that in real ceremony there's no audience. Everyone should be participating and taking part within that ceremony. It's not like what happens in quite a lot of the kind of Western church, where the priests will do something and everyone's just standing there watching it happen. It's not that. And my my experience in so far as the ceremony of Torin's funeral, for example, and the GoFundMe campaign and the building of the boat, which I see as very much just an extension of that ceremony. You gotta have people. It's about community. It's about weaving people in, or being woven into, so to speak. That's what my sense is that Torin, his soul, and the powers that be behind him have been weaving this fabric of community for
Mhm.
years around us, and so it's inclusive. It pulls you in. Um, and as far as the craft is concerned, for me, it's practice. It's
Mhm.
practice for life.
Mhm.
Insofar as it's a conversation between you and material, with the tool as the kind of intermediary or an extension of your own body, with what it is you're doing with that tool. So it's about sensitivity.
Mhm.
Um, it's about being in a certain kind of mindset when you're actually doing it, rather than focused, not thinking about anything else.
Mhm.
um, being present, basically.
Mhm.
So that level of craft is absolutely practice for life,
Yeah.
and how that then fuses with the community aspect of ceremony, is, well, a community is a group of people who live together, um, and it's just an amazing opportunity to get good at living together,
Mm.
living well
Mm.
together. That it's
Mhm.
all in there. That's what it's asking for, I think.
Mhm.
um, and so practicing the craft of ceremony, or practicing the craft of living well with other people through the experience of one another's lives. So for Torin, for us, it was his story that wove this incredible network of loving friends and family around us,
Mm.
and his story opened people up.
Mhm.
He had this incredible propensity to kind of to break people open, but not, they weren't always just sitting there on their hands and knees in bits, but you could see, because of the story, that people's
Mhm.
defenses would just drop, you know, and
Mhm.
they'd be totally there with him. And he was very, very engaging, very, very eloquent, and very, um, very charming. So it
Mhm.
wasn't hard to kind of sit down with him, and for him to talk to you for a long time. You know,
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
were very engaged. So the when it came to his funeral, it was, you know, we didn't do that, as in me and Sean. We had some ideas about how we wanted things to be, but the incredible thing was is that the whole community just went, you know, and
Mhm.
just cinched around us. And this incredible day, this horrendous, beautiful day, was kind of was made. Um, and I am incredibly, you know, fortunate and grateful to live in a place where that kind of thing can happen, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And at the same time, we we had a hand in making it happen by sharing our story.
Mhm.
That's the other thing I
Mhm.
think about this kind of the crafting, the ceremonial aspect of life is about sharing stories. You
Mhm.
know, if we don't, we're us Westerners are seem to be so individuated,
Mhm.
and we live our lives privately behind closed doors to such an extent that we don't share enough of ourselves with one another, and therefore communities can't kind of subsist. They can't be
Mhm.
sustained. Um, and one thing I saw throughout Torin's life was by being open about our story with him, about the reality of the situation with him, about our outwardly about with our grief of the situation. Um, that's what makes communities happen. That's what brings communities together. The um, is the sharing of,
Mhm.
you know, our life stories, and
Mhm.
so that when someone within the community that everyone cares about dies, this this incredible thing can happen, you know, whereby that person can be honored and they can be grieved for openly, and by expressing that grief openly um, and you know, deeply and in a very real way, um, then beauty happens. Beauty
Mhm.
comes in on the coattails of grief, and
Mhm.
uh, and that's the life-giving thing about it, you know, about grief, is that
Mhm.
it's not, again, it's not one of these things to be um, denied. Going back to the whole diagnosis thing and shutting things away, you know, and going, no, I'm not letting that in because I've got a plan and this is how I want to do things. What happens then is you shut grief in the cupboard as well.
Mhm.
And what happens to us when we do that, when we shut grief out of our lives? I actually happen to believe that grief has a function in the world,
Mhm.
um, and it does have our best interests at heart,
Mhm.
to the extent that if we let it come, if we let grief into our lives, then we also let our propensity to see beauty in too.
Mhm.
And so when we cut grief out, our ability to see beauty in the world is diminished as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, that feels like a beautiful place to sort of start to land, um, and wrap. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm just, yeah, so grateful for this conversation
Hmm.
and for your sharing the
Me
story.
too. Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah. Thank you. And I know, and like you said, it's the beauty too of how now with the GoFundMe, it's like Torin continues to weave this web of community around you all, even in like wider and wider circles. You know, it
Mm.
seems like, um, you know, as people are sharing the GoFundMe and more, you know, I don't know. That's what it seems like from over here anyway. I don't know how it feels to you, but
Well, I don't know if you've run a crowdfunder before, but it's a slog. It really is
Yeah.
a slog. And we're, yeah, like I said earlier, we've hit 50%, so we've got 50% to go.
Mhm.
It's drawing to a close on the 9th of June
Mhm.
because over here, I'm writing an article for a newspaper, a national newspaper, and the article goes out on the 2nd of June. So we'll give it a week. It's an
Mhm.
opportunity for hopefully more donations to come in, and
Yeah.
try as hard as we can to get to the target.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what if anybody listening, I encourage you, if you are moved by this conversation, to, yeah, hop on over and, yeah, give what you can. Like I said, I've got the GoFundMe below. I'll have the link in the show notes. But yeah, so is there anything final that you feel I'll just share? I mean, the other thing, the sort of final question I was kind of feeling a little too was, obviously it's an emergent um, journey, but
Hmm.
what are you, how do you feel Torin still present in your life right now? Or, what do you, yeah. Um, like,
Um, I mean, he's everywhere in the
yeah.
sense that we're still in the same house that he grew up in.
Mm,
Everywhere we go, and we haven't moved away. So everywhere we go, there are memories of him. So
mm,
he's very present in that sense. Um, there is the experience of the grief still, of him not being with us, which is in a way, kind of that is a way of him being present with us. Is the grief,
mhm,
um, and then in quiet moments of prayerfulness, um, sometimes I can actually feel his full presence. I can
mhm,
actually feel him very strongly, and that's a beautiful thing. But that's not on tap. That doesn't kind
mhm.
of go right. I'm going to just close my eyes now. You
Yeah.
know, here he comes.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like
No.
that. So, yeah, that's about as much as I can say. I could get all esoteric and say he's in the air and he's in the trees and
Mhm,
he's in the wind and the sea and everything. And there is probably some truth to that.
mhm,
I actually happen to have a strong sense that he's in a place where he's well loved, and that he's with a lot of other people who went before him, who are there with him, and I know he's okay. He's really okay. I
mhm,
do know that.
mhm,
Um, so that's all in the mix in terms of how we
mhm,
feel his presence. Yeah,
mhm, mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be, yeah, I'm sure as you said, beautiful and horrific, or yeah, terrible, kind of
yeah, yeah,
the process of building the boat. I'm sure that will, I know you've made plans already, come up with the plans for it, but I think you said you're picking out the trees and the lumber soon too, right? Did I read
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In the next few weeks, probably. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the boat, like I said, is many things, and so it is. It's also a way of being close to him.
Yeah.
It's our
Yep.
excuse to spend 6 months, kind of being close to him, in insofar as like we're going to building our boy a boat, and
Yeah.
he would be super excited about it.
Yeah.
He would, and maybe he is.
Yeah. I
Um,
actually hadn't read Swallows and Amazons, but I checked it out at the library. Actually, I was hoping to have it done before we met today,
oh
but I
yeah,
didn't get it.
yeah.
But anyway, so that's another little ripple from him as I'm reading that book now.
It's a very,
After
very
hearing the
English
story.
story. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's reminding me though of some of my favorites as a kid, all of the like kids going off on adventures to
yeah,
some
yeah.
place that, yeah, as an adult you'd probably be like, oh, it's just this, but where kids have imagination and sort of this vision that's still somewhat connected to the other world, right? And so
Mhm.
it just imbues everything with kind of an extra level of like magic and mystery and adventure.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
There's a good film there's a good film of it, but I would go for the old ones, kind of shot in the maybe the 70s or something like
Okay.
that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, anything else you want to close out with, or you feel like wants to be said, or um, it's okay if
I think
not. That's
no, I did have something, but it's completely gone.
Oh no.
Yeah. There was something else I was going to mention, but yeah, it's just it escaped me.
Hmm. Okay. Well, if it comes back to you, you can email me and I'll add
Sure,
it in somehow.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Or we could retrace steps for a moment or just give it a moment and see if it comes back. But
Hmm.
because we've been talking about the GoFundMe, we've been talking about the lumber, Torin's presence, the
Yeah.
building of the boat, the book, the community.
It was something around the when you asked about Torin's presence, I had something.
Mm,
How do you experience that? Yeah, but yeah, it's good.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, beautiful. Well, thank you again, Duncan. Yeah, I know you've got a
My
lot
pleasure.
going on right now.
Yeah.
But I
Thank
really
you.
appreciated this conversation. Yeah. And getting to just wonder about these things with you. So
Yeah, it's a pleasure to do it. It's it's not I suppose yeah, there is some catharsis in talking about it, but actually it's just come back to me.
yay.
The thing that I wanted to say was that you know, Sean and I feel very much that we are in a position to be able to help others, and the boat is obviously something that we're building for Torin, but it's also a means by which we can um, make something tangible in the world from the grief of the story. You know, make something beautiful, make beauty from the grief, and we hope that that is something that might be helpful towards others, other
Yeah.
parents who find themselves in situations where they're receiving diagnosis of their kids, and especially I mean specifically kind of terminal life limiting diagnosis for their children. Um, and we want to be able to kind of plant a flag in the ground and say, we're here, we've been through this, and there were some things that we found helpful, and there were some things we found not so helpful along the way. And if you would like some assistance, or for us to walk alongside you for a little bit of the time, then we're willing to do that. And that's something we would really love to be able to kind of offer to people who find themselves at the beginning of that path. And quite rightly, a lot of people earlier in those early days, if you walk up to them and say hi, my kid died, they just tell you to walk.
Yeah.
So it has to be very, very subtly done. But yeah, just being a presence and just knowing for people to know that there is a place they can go. There are few other couples, families around us whose children have also died, and also want to be helpful in that way. And I don't know about North America, but in this country, one of the things that wasn't really offered to us, the care, the healthcare was amazing over the 12 years that Torin was alive. But one thing that wasn't really there, or doesn't exist, as far as I know, is this kind of network that has an understanding about the lived human experience of everyday life with a child who has that kind of prognosis hanging over them. There's not many places or charities out there that I'm aware of, and it's a really lonely place to be. So we want to try and create something whereby people can maybe not be so lonely some of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I think I certainly see in the States here, like even as more conversation around the mental and emotional aspects of something like that come in, it's still sort of limited more or less to like talk therapy resources, which
Mm, mm.
have their value for sure. But there is something about, we were talking about craft and actually bringing something through your hands and actually building, the
Yeah,
somatic
yeah,
element of it,
exactly.
that, and the ceremony element and the ritual element, and then the community element that
Hmm.
is still
Absolutely.
just deeply missing from the conversations.
Yeah,
And those
yeah,
seem to be such an intrinsic part of what it is to be alive. Those seem to be really important processes, like
yeah,
ancestral processes. Oh, that like if we can remember that they're there, can help us yeah, be alive through all of these kinds of things.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of all the aspects of what we want to look at with this thing. It's community, and kind of making things with your hands, and the kind of a certain amount of literacy around grief.
Yeah.
Another thing is to kind of help to kind of educate people, if they don't already have that level of education, around the fight, flight, freeze response within the body, and how the nervous system acts, within trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is incredibly useful information to kind of know what's happening in your body when you're having a panic attack, for example.
Yeah.
And then the other thing for me, which has been a huge kind of learning ground for me throughout the time of Torin's life, was solitude in nature. The kind of
Mm-hmm.
the very, very healing aspects, and the
Yeah.
deep learning that can come from spending time on your own out in natural landscapes,
Yeah.
is also an incredible thing that we'd love to kind of facilitate people being able to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Well, because nature's part of the community, I mean,
Yeah, of course.
nature's,
Yeah.
yeah, in that sort of animist sense, there's a sentience,
Hmm. Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
yeah, has it be part of our community.
Hmm.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll invite everybody listening to just, yeah, take a couple deep breaths and just gently start to trust that the conversation will just kind of settle in, and to, yeah, just gently start to uh, draw yourself back from the fire and prepare yourself to kind of go back into your life, your day, your community, your space, letting the ripples of the conversation kind of move with you. But yeah. And so, yeah, that we will see you next time around the fire. Hi, Kate here again. Thank you for gathering with us. Whether you've been here a while or found your way here thanks to today's guest, it means so much to me and the world I dream of to have you here. I hope you'll tune in for more of our conversations. We humans seem to be at a profound threshold and facing questions of deep impact for the future and the world. We need our full hearts and humanity as we sow seeds of change in these times of joy and heartbreak. I count myself lucky to be here now, around this virtual village fire, weaving our stories into a medicine with humans like you. As a community medicine space, this podcast is relational. It weaves webs of connection and mutual respect and care across time and space. If you appreciate and support the future we're seeding here, you can support the weaving of this web in a few ways. 1, share episodes with friends and family or online with your community. It also helps the podcast immensely if you like, rate, subscribe to, or follow the podcast where you watch or listen, so you get notified when new episodes drop and new listeners find us as they search. 2, join us on Patreon. Doing so supports conversations like the one you just heard and allows you access to live community gatherings and medicine circles and more as we continue to grow. It also helps me keep the space advertisement-free so the conversations stay intact as they are. If you have questions, suggestions, connections, or would like to find out more about working with me, you can find me online at www.wildsacredjourney.com. on Instagram at wildsacredjourney_KP, or email me, kate@wildsacredjourney.com. Until next time, from my heart to yours, I release today's fire with a prayer for our individual and collective wholeness, connection, and joy. May it be so.